I'd like to introduce you to our panellists. We have Sarah Churchman, who is Head of Diversity at PwC, Fiona Arnold, Partner at F1 Recruitment. We have Zainab Kemsley, CR and Diversity Manager at Simmons & Simmons, Laura Czapiewski, Product Manager for Childcare Vouchers at Edenred, Veronica King, Campaigns Manager at the Daycare Trust, and Ruth Renton, an employment law specialist from Renton Associates. So, to begin with, I'd like to introduce you to Sarah Churchman from PwC to get us started.
Thank you, Zoe. Hi, everybody. My name's Sarah, as Zoe said, and I've been asked this afternoon just to speak to you a little bit about the people networks or employee networks that we have at PwC, particularly to engage with our parents and our carers, and the impact that those networks have on our levels of employee engagement. I thought before I'd go into the detail of our employee networks and our parents network, I'd talk to you a little bit about diversity at PwC. I think there's always a tendency to think of diversity in the context of women at work or ethnic minorities at work. But as you can see from this diagram, that the palette, as we call it, or the wheel, when we talk about diversity at PwC, which is a positive thing for business, we mean all those attributes, all those characteristics that make each and every one of us an individual, whether they're ingrained in our being, i.e. our gender or our age, or whether they are more external, and equally whether they come from a person's position in the organisation. So I think when we're trying to engage our workforce, we have to segment our population, but at the very heart of this agenda is the realisation that everyone is a unique individual. And therefore our networks were created some years ago now to recognise the fact that some of our more formal development programmes may need to be supplemented by mechanisms to really connect with our people and better understand them. So if we move on to the next slide, Zoe, our networks offer us a number of different benefits, as you can see here, all of which impact our levels of engagement, which we measure through a biannual survey which we call You Matter. I think particularly in our experience of parents returning to work, mothers returning to work, what they want most of all, other than some financial support, which we offer through our Edenred childcare vouchers, they actually want to connect with people who are going through similar experiences to themselves, if only to realise that they're not the only one ever to have given birth or to have had a child who doesn't sleep through the night even at the age of 1 or 18 months. So our networks, our parents network, is a hugely successful network which has been in existence for about 10 years, 11 years even. And it's designed to help people to connect with each other because they've got a common interest. There's some common ground there. The other aspect, I think, in terms of a real commercial benefit for us as an employer, is that by engaging with our parents network and increasingly our carers network, we can better understand what the experience of parents and carers is at PwC, and this can help us to develop new policies or indeed amend or enhance our existing policies. And finally, networking, I think, really does allow people to be themselves at work, and it's really important that people feel they can be themselves at work, recognising that they're not alone, they are sharing experiences, but they're a great way of building employee engagement. So if we move on to the next slide, what do our networks actually do? Well, they connect staff. That's the most important thing. They connect them physically, but also virtually. We are a national, a global organisation, but here in the UK, our people are spread across 30 offices from Aberdeen down to Plymouth. So it's really important that they can connect with people from across the PwC network. So our virtual chat room allows them to do just that. The Parents Network particularly is also really helpful at signposting our people to guidance and the support that is available, both within the firm but also externally, including through our providers for parents at PwC. We also learn a lot from our networks, and that's really helpful in building inclusion in our organisation to better understand the issues that our carers and our parents are experiencing. They put on some great events, and we bring in some fantastic external speakers, whether you have a child of a few months old or whether you're going through those terrible teenage years, or you're losing your child off to university. We run really engaging events that are informative and really help to build the knowledge base of our parents. And as I said earlier, finally, they really offer us the opportunity to consult with our parents to inform our policy. So a really great example of that at the moment is we're consulting with our parents network as we respond to the latest government consultation on the modern workplace, which I know we're going to be talking about a little bit later. So that's a very whistle-stop tour through our parents and carers network, but they're really invaluable to building employee engagement at PwC.
Great, Sarah, thank you so much. So moving on to a completely different area, which obviously makes this discussion so interesting, I'd like to introduce you to Fiona Arnold from F1 Recruitment. Fiona.
Thank you, Zoe. Good afternoon, everyone. As Zoe said, I'm Fiona, and I'm a senior partner at F1 Recruitment. I'll just give you a little bit of background. F1 was founded in 2004, and in the last 7 years, we've established ourselves as one of the best networked recruitment consultancies in London with an EMEA and global reach, and we work in the sort of marketing communications area. Our business model is pretty unique, and it's managed from our offices in Soho in London, and also with a flexible working model from home. We've got a very lean business structure with all our admin services being outsourced, and we have a small senior leadership team. And our unique working model that we've used for the last 7 years has got to a stage now where we've got very unique challenges attracting high caliber recruiters. We've got currently 10 partners within the partnership. We're all female, and we work within a very flat structure. 2 of our partners have just returned from maternity leave, and we're all mothers except one of the partners. When we founded F1, we wanted to give each partner the opportunity to work flexibly from both the London office on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and then work from home on 2 half days, so a Tuesday and a Friday. So what we've got is a 4-day model, worked over 5 days. And it's interesting to see how the different working patterns and styles have emerged over the years without compromising the quality of service that we deliver to both our candidates and clients, and also to the internal training and development that we give to the partners. And this flexible model, one of the reasons we set it up was to allow us to accommodate school runs, go for a morning run, play tennis, or to take your child to a hospital appointment, or like me yesterday afternoon to run away from the desk and take my son to the doctor for 2 hours. Flip side of working from home is that you're more accessible to those outside demands, and you sometimes feel it would be a whole lot easier to be in the London office, but we make it work. All the partners have access to everything at home that they would have in the office, and also mobile access to email. And we've structured this framework so we all understand and can work within it, and it gives us the opportunity to balance our work and balance our life. It's been interesting for us because sometimes when we've been looking for recruiters to work with us, that the word flexible is sometimes misinterpreted by people, and they think that we're working part-time or that we want to shift down the gear, whereas in reality what we're doing is we're able to be much more flexible, and I think we probably work faster and smarter in many cases. We've reached a stage in our growth where we've got new challenges around the days that we work in London, and issues of sort of career progression for people, and we're addressing these at the moment, so with our usual vigour and enthusiasm. Later this summer, one of the issues is later this summer we're moving from our serviced offices to our own leased office, which means we're going to have to take on a reception 5 days a week. So internally that means that two of us are sort of shifting our days that we work in London, and I think that the natural shift is the two of us with older children are sort of shifting to other days. Our final challenge is to accommodate experienced recruiters who want to be office-based 5 days a week and start on an employed basis rather than self-employed. At the moment, we're all at different stages of our lives with different family commitments, and I think the flexible working model has really accommodated this. As I say, we're all female. We would love some men to come and join our team as well, but we're finding that a challenge because we're not actually getting many male applications. I'm not quite sure why it is. It's early days, so I hope that will change, particularly with the five-day model. From a candidate perspective, we also appreciate that our candidates may want to work more flexibly, and we have come up with something called our 60-40 offering, which reflects this and is part of our recruitment process. So when we're recruiting for a client, we always offer a balanced shortlist, which will often include candidates who are looking to work in alternative ways to the normal 5 days, 9 to 5. And we were gaining huge popularity with this with our clients before the downturn, but since 2008, it's definitely been more difficult to persuade clients to look at the wealth of talent in the marketplace who don't want to work 5 days a week. Although saying that, we have placed a number of candidates in senior positions recently who are now working 4 days a week. I think just a final point, one of the reasons why I think our model works is because we place a huge amount of trust in each other. We all work to the same high standards, and if somebody chooses to work at night once they've put their children to bed or at the weekends, we respect this, and that is that particular partner's choice as to how they work more effectively in order to balance their work and their life. And I think that respect and trust that we have is very sort of mutually reciprocated amongst the team. So that's a little bit about F1 and our challenges. Thanks very much, Sue.
Great. Thank you to you. Now, our next speaker was Zainab Kemsley from Simmons & Simmons, but she's having some problems logging on, so hopefully we'll come back to her in a second. I think I'd like to move on to Laura from Edenred. Laura, if that's okay, I'm going to bring up your slides here. So Laura, over to you.
I'm the Product Manager for Childcare Vouchers at Edenred. So I'm just going to give an overview of childcare vouchers, in particular a change in legislation that came in April and the challenges that presents to employers. Childcare vouchers are one of the top benefits for working parents because they're tax and national insurance exempt, which means there's huge savings for parents. And they're also exempt from employers' national insurance contributions, which means that for employers they're also a cost-effective benefit to introduce. They're usually offered as salary sacrifice, so the employee's salary is reduced and they receive a corresponding amount of childcare vouchers. Anyone who joined the scheme before the 6th of April can get £243 a month tax and national insurance exempt. Employees who join after the 6th of April might have this reduced if they're higher or additional rate taxpayers. But those who do join before can carry on getting 243 indefinitely unless they change employers or they stop receiving childcare vouchers for more than 12 months. Next. Just to go over some of the savings available, so for basic rate taxpayers you can save up to £933 a year regardless of when they join the scheme. You see the next one is for higher rate taxpayers, and there you can see if they join the scheme before the 6th of April they were able to save more than £1,200 a year. However, for those who join after the 6th of April, it's £623 a year they can save. So it's still significant savings for higher rate taxpayers who joined after the 6th of April. For additional rate taxpayers, and that's those earning over £150,000 a year. If they did join the scheme before the 6th of April, could save over £1,500 a year. After the 6th of April, they can now save just over £600 a year. The amount they can get is restricted to £97 a month. For higher rate taxpayers, that was £124 a month. So one of the main challenges for employers is to establish, for those who join the scheme now, which tax category they actually fall into. And to do that, they have to perform a basic earnings assessment. They do this using the figures that are available at the start of the tax year or when the employees join the scheme. It remains valid for the whole tax year regardless of any change in circumstances. So if, for instance, somebody joined the scheme now and then in January had a pay rise that took them into a higher rate category, they'd still be able to get the amount that they were able to get when they joined the scheme until the following April. So the biggest challenges for employers, especially large employers who have people joining regularly, might come towards next April when they have to do a basic earnings assessment for everybody who joined the scheme this year. The basic earnings assessment, if we move on to the next slide, it's based on all guaranteed elements of pay, so it's contractual salary, and then guaranteed bonuses, any London waiting, guaranteed overtime, and that's overtime that's paid even if it's not actually worked. Commission is included, and it's a average of the last 2 years, and that's commission where it's contractual commission, that's a percentage of money made for the company. And things that are not included is anything discretionary, so performance-related bonuses, overtime payments, and then of course anything that's exempt from tax and national insurance, such as childcare vouchers, it reduces the salary, so that will actually reduce the basic earnings assessment as it's taken away from the calculation. If we move on to the next slide, for all employees, the high rate threshold is 35,000, but HMRC have said that it can be assumed that employees all have the standard personal allowance, which is £7,475. So in actual fact, the higher rate threshold becomes 42475. So if somebody earns above that, they'll only be able to get £124 a month free from tax and national insurance. At the additional rate category of those earning £150,000 a year, there isn't a personal allowance at that point, so it is just a threshold of £150,000 a year. But of course, as the salary sacrifice actually reduces the salary, in effect, before doing the salary sacrifice, somebody could earn over £45,000 a year, and once the 2916, which is the maximum they can get, is reduced from that, it brings their salary down to the basic rate threshold, so they would be able to get the whole 243. So it's a little bit more complicated than just saying somebody who earns over the threshold, but it is it's fairly straightforward in practice. As well as childcare vouchers, there are a range of other benefits that employers can introduce to engage working parents, and these can include things like employee savings, flexible benefit schemes, EAPs or advice lines, and family advice forums and networks, such as those referred to by Sarah earlier.
Great, Laura. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Laura. Whistling through now, I'd like to introduce you to Veronica King from the Daycare Trust. Veronica, over to you.
Thanks, Zoe. So I'm from Daycare Trust. We're the national childcare charity. We're currently celebrating our 20th anniversary, and we campaign on affordable, high-quality local childcare for all, and really represent the voice of parents, carers and children on childcare issues. So in terms of the challenges around making workplaces family friendly, our view is that the biggest challenge is the cost of childcare in the UK. We know this is a big barrier to work for many parents, and we speak to parents all the time, many of whom have been really career driven and proud of their career, but when they sit down to work out the finances, especially if they have 2 children under school age, it's just not in their interest to work, certainly not to work full-time. The UK has the highest childcare costs anywhere in Europe, with parents spending on average 33% of their net income on childcare, and it's not uncommon for us to talk to parents who tell us their childcare costs are actually higher than their mortgage. Every year for the last 10 years we've carried out research into childcare costs in the UK, and every year consistently these costs have gone up, so it's very much a strong trend. this year, the findings really underline the point that I just made about the financial sense for many parents of working. Our survey found this year that for parents in England, 25 hours of nursery care per week for a child under 2 equates to a cost of around £5,000 per year. Actually £6,000 in London, such are the regional increases there. And the prices this year have gone up by twice the average pay increase in the same period. So we're seeing many parents, particularly women, being priced out of the workplace because of childcare costs. Next. And apart from cost, I think one of the other big issues, we've heard a bit about it already, is around availability and finding childcare at the time that parents need it. We recently undertook some work about childcare for parents who work atypical hours, and our research found that there are lots of parents out there working hours that vary. 4 in 10 parents work hours which vary from week to week, and 16% work shifts. So it's a sizable amount of parents we're talking about who are faced by this challenge. It's lone parents, low-income families that are most likely to be found in jobs which demand they work atypical hours, and often they're in the weakest place in terms of the labour market to be able to find and pay for childcare outside of these hours. We know that where the childcare is there, it's often very limited to what's available locally, and if they are able to find something, the costs can typically be much higher. 67% of parents working these kind of hours told us that they'd struggle to find childcare to meet their needs. And our recent holiday childcare cost survey, which was published last week to mark National Childcare Week, showed a really worrying trend of local authorities cutting their funding for their play services and holiday childcare schemes. And although local authorities have a duty under the Childcare Act 2006 to ensure that there is sufficient childcare in place at the times when parents need it, the reality is that with funding cuts, it looks as though that childcare is actually being cut. Okay, next. So in terms of a family-friendly culture, I guess some of the things that we would identify as being key for employers to making their workplace as family-friendly as possible would be around promoting and supporting flexible working. It's great to hear the example from Ruth about how they operate this in their workplace. One thing that we think is really important actually is that flexible working opportunities, where possible, can be made across the whole organisation and not solely for parents, because this is really important in terms of tackling the culture around sometimes people's views about flexible working. It can really, if it can be spread across the whole organisation, then it really helps to normalise it, and people can kind of have lots of respect for flexible working. Obviously, we're very keen on implementing employer-based childcare voucher schemes, and our information service offers lots of advice to employers who are looking to implement childcare voucher schemes. So we're kind of constantly telling people it's fairly straightforward to do this, and it's a massive advantage to your employers. And thirdly, and I suppose really it just underpins everything else, is just the importance of employers being aware of their employees' needs, so that they can respond accordingly, so that they know their workforce, they know what they need in order to be able to balance the demands of their personal life and their work life. So, for example, it might be the above. It might be trying to look at ways that they can put out-of-hours childcare schemes in place, which some NHS organisations have done, where they've got large numbers of employees who need childcare and can't find it at the times they need it. Okay, next. And as for the question of why we believe that employers should do these things, should really prioritise being family friendly, we'd say that happy employees are more productive employees. If these needs are taken into account, parents can focus on doing their job and doing it well and not having to run around trying to sort all this out. We think that by putting these kind of provisions in place, you reduce the rate of staff turnover, and also less likely to lose valued employees, like some of those mothers that I talked about earlier, who just cannot find a way to balance doing their jobs. with their childcare needs. And when they know there are other companies out there that will respond to the needs of their family lives better, why shouldn't they go elsewhere? And further to that, by implementing these kind of measures, it helps to establish a good reputation for the firm, and therefore helping to attract the best staff in the future. I think that's it for me.
Brilliant. Veronica, thank you so much. Really highlighted a lot of important points there, I think. I think just finally, the employment law challenges is a very big issue, and hoping to open up discussion on that in a few minutes. But I'd like to introduce Ruth Renton, who will take us through that. Ruth.
Thanks, Zoe. Hello, everybody. My name's Ruth Renton. Just to give you a bit of background about me, I'm an employment lawyer qualified since 1994, and I'm also a trainer. I provide HR training and development. So I have both sides of the coin and often go into the workplace and see, and I'm a very big advocate of diversity and change and recognition by employers of doing something different. And from my perspective, I don't know if you've seen, but I'm a mum of 4 kids, and I believe that I have an independent job, but I don't do only set hours, and I need flexibility, and it's one of the reasons why I set up my own business. Now, my challenge for today is confining myself to a very short period of time on one of my most favourite topics, but my 4-minute slot is basically going to be this whistle-stop tour of the typical challenges that employers can face in relation to what I call family-friendly rights. So we're going to look at some existing law issues, some new law issues, and very, very briefly, we're going to touch on the consultation for the modern workplace, which was a consultation launched by the government in May 2011, and that consultation period is finishing next week, but it's to take into account basic changes to legislation in 2015. I think I'm not going to be able to give you answers to everything, but I want to highlight these issues because they're always in the workplace, and I think one of the key issues employers need to overcome at the moment in this tight market is that people working flexibly actually can give so much more. And I think Fiona was saying the impression is that people are sort of downsizing in terms of taking their foot off the pace, and that's not true. People just want flexibility to give more to their employers. Overall, I see that the greatest challenges that I can see within the workplace for employers are there's firstly a huge administrative burden coping with each aspect of family-friendly rights. We're going to touch on additional paternity leave, or APL. That's a biggie. Secondly, there's a huge complexity in each different type of family-friendly right, and an employer needs to get to grips with it and ensure that they're not making a mistake, which is the third challenge, the worry of getting it wrong and facing a potential claim at tribunal. Remember, in the past year, we go up again and again an increase in employment tribunal claims, and employers are concerned about facing and fighting discrimination claims. Simply, I think that there is a huge impact in business in terms of growth and planning and cover, because a lot of our family-friendly rights have very short notice periods, really, to staff or provide alternative staffing, which could be expensive to the business. And I think the final challenge that employers face with is this communication, this constant communication process, so that almost positions don't become entrenched. And that's why seeing what or hearing what Sarah is talking about in terms of networks, etc., maintaining communications is absolutely key. So looking at some of the existing law details, I wanted to flag some of the things that have come up again and again. Independently, there is a constant challenge in recording absences for emergency situations, maintaining communication between managers in the workplace and HR so that they can tell payroll that that person's gone off and shouldn't be paid for that percentage of time. Because, of course, if you don't inform HR and payroll, then you're potentially setting a precedent by paying the people that go off for emergency leave. You've also got risks of precedent setting. A lot of employers are concerned that if they, by emergency reasons, adjust childcare arrangements because a nanny's walked out, so an employee needs to emergency-wise leave early, are they setting a precedent for this to continue for 2 to 3 weeks, which means when they make that request, it means it's okay, it can be done, probably can, but they're concerned about that. There's a whole question as to what is emergency and how long this needs to last for. Is it just for a couple of days or is it for longer? let's look at flexible working. The issues that tend to come up are, I think Fiona highlighted this, that in this current market, employers are very concerned about looking at flexible arrangements because they're in a tight market, hitting, considerable targets, and they don't understand that a flexible working model can mean actually putting in the hours and doing what's done, but in a child and family-friendly situation. So it's overcoming a trust issue. It's explaining that working from home can work, and it doesn't mean that you're going to go to the hairdresser. And it's also, there needs to be guidance to employers in prioritising the various different requests for flexible working to make it work while taking into account the risks of a discrimination claim. My issue on parental leave is that there's a very, very short notice period before a trigger for somebody taking parental leave. So there's only 21 days notice, and if you're looking to provide alternative cover, it's a very short period. Yes, an employer can postpone by up to 6 months, but it's tricky for them to do that, so I think that's a huge challenge to overcome. And of course, the model is only allowing for 1 week blocks or up to 4 weeks, not for the possibility of the odd day here and there, which would also help, by the way, when we've all got sports days and Christmas concerts and various and sundry that would happen. Now, looking at a new law challenge, looking at additional paternity leave, we are going to deal with some of these questions that have been raised, and they're all very, very valid. My issue with APL is the huge administrative burden, the level of liaison that's required between employers and employers of the maternity leave person, employers of the paternity, and planning. 8 weeks notice, and then an employee could be off potentially for up to 34 weeks. And then you've got the administrative burden of monitoring holiday, keeping in touch days, and return to work. I think we'll look at whether or not the reality of it being taken up later on, perhaps in the questions. Positive discrimination, I just wanted to highlight, I think it's great to look at underrepresentation in the workforce. I just can't believe you'll truly have 2 identical candidates with exactly the same qualifications, which will enable you to make that choice, and I think we'll have to suck it and see. Finally, I want to touch on the concept of associated discrimination and the risks and challenges to an employer of accommodating carers' needs, particularly from personal experience, because carers who are dealing with elderly or disabled families will have issues in terms of contacting during working hours, doctors, social services, occupational health. They're not going to be at their desk. They're not going to be able to be around, and it's accommodating them and helping them while they're still going to have quite tight performance targets. I'm going to throw this open to you because I have lots of different suggestions and perhaps a sharing by everybody as to what could come forward, but I do think we need to start thinking flexibly to make this model work. Very, very finally, just in terms of the government consultation, we've got as an aid memoir 2 slides that look at the different changes that are proposed. Again, I think it's going to be a huge administrative burden because parents could potentially share leave, and there's going to be huge notification requirements to different employers. But I'll throw that open for you to discussion. Over to you, Louise. Zoe, pardon.
Great. All right. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for our panellists. I think have really all come from very different directions, which is great. And now we want to open it up for you, the audience, to be involved. So please start sending me messages if you haven't already, and we can bring up what you want. If you would like to speak directly to anybody, please click on the little button and put your hand up. But just want to continue what Ruth was mentioning, very much about additional paternity leave. As I said at the beginning, this really came up in the comments when you registered. And so just very quickly, I'd just like to launch a quick poll for us to really see how this is affecting you. How do you feel about APL? Please tick. As I said, it's anonymous. Let's see what everybody thinks about it. I'll leave it up there for about 30 seconds. Let's see what you're saying. So I'll leave that up for a few. Will it have a huge impact on your business? Do you think it won't be used at all? Are you very confused by it? Are your employees confused by it? Or you're interested to see what the future holds? Okay, so a few more of you can vote, which would be great. And I'm going to close that now. And let's share the results. Let's see what's happened. So you can see that 70% of you voted, and a lot of you are very interested to see what the future holds. So I think that's very interesting. We'd be interested to know if anyone in the audience have had experience already of APL. Have you been requested anything by your employees? Do employees want to know more information? Ruth, tell us what do you think really are, what feedback have you been getting with regards to the whole administration process of APL? Has that been a big thing?
I think it's been a very, very huge concern because unlike other elements of employment legislation for family-friendly rights, they've actually taken it and made it an HMRC notification process between the employers effectively and to HMRC, as opposed to what normally happens internally within the workplace. I think there is a huge administrative burden. It requires the mother to sign her form saying she is going back to work, so she's going to serve 8 weeks notice to come back to work early, which affects, by the way, the usual maternity leave requirements, just in terms of plans. I think one of the big issues is it would be nice, I think, from the employer's perspective, if the employees can be a bit more upfront, if maybe the mother, before she takes her mat leave, can actually turn around and say, well, actually, I'm considering having a shared leave situation, and I will be coming back early, and I think approximately it will be then to enable there to be good business planning. The other thing I was going to say is that in terms of the studies that I've seen so far and the research, and I've looked at small to medium enterprises, the Federation of Small Businesses, and Demos, a think tank, they're all talking about a 1 in 10 take-up purely because £124, which is the statutory paternity leave, is just that bit too low. It only accounts for about 25% of the man's salary generally, and it's just too low for them to survive.
Yeah, no, I understand. And just over to you, Sarah, at PwC. How do you think this APL will have an impact in your organisation?
Well, we did some consultation with our dads some years ago now when this was first on the government's radar screen. And I have to say, I think if more dads took time off to look after their babies, I think we'd probably have greater equality in the workplace anyway. But our research was a little bit depressing, really, because we found that many of our dads, for the point that's just been made, wouldn't be taking the leave. They would take what we give them already, which is 2 weeks fully paid paternity leave, but they wouldn't be taking any additional leave if it was at statutory maternity pay rates, because most families have already sort of, structured themselves to sort of fulfill roles based on strong fiscal reasons.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's going to be, I'm interested to see what the future holds, really, to see, I think there'll be a low take-up initially, but I think over time more dads might take it up. I think the government's thinking on pay might change as well.
Yes, and I think seeing from comments that are coming through, I think most people necessarily at this stage, we don't have the experience to really say what's going to happen. Everybody is sitting and waiting to see. I think if we had this discussion again a year down the line, we might have sort of more concrete things to say. So I think it's sort of an interesting time. We can happily come back to APL if anyone wants, but just a couple of interesting questions have come through. A big thing, Veronica, to you is about a couple of things that actually have come through, mainly about extension of the nursery day. I think that's a real issue for a lot of working parents, that people are looking forward to it being a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. day. Is that coming to effect? Can you comment on that at all?
So the government announced in the last couple of weeks that it's something we've been campaigning for some time, that the free entitlement, which every 3 and 4-year-old receive 15 hours of free childcare a week, but at the moment it can only be taken in 5 blocks of 3 hours or 3 blocks of 5 hours. So obviously that's not long enough to cover a full working day for parents. So lots of parents are using that but then having to top up the cost on top of that. And it can also only be taken between 8 AM and 6 PM, which means that parents who work outside of 9 to 5 or who have a longer commute, again, are forced to top up. So the government announced last week or the week before that they're going to put out a consultation in the autumn which would allow parents to use the free entitlement between 7 AM and 7 PM and to use it in 2 blocks of time. So you could use it in 7.5 hours and 7.5 hours, which would obviously cover almost a full working day, which from our point of view would be really good because we know that would make it more economically viable for some parents, and particularly some mums, to go back to work part-time. They could do 2 days of part-time work and not really have any childcare costs under that kind of model. So we're very much welcoming it, but at this stage it is only at consultation level, so we should know more about that in the autumn. But certainly it's one step kind of in terms of trying to increase childcare provision outside of those typical hours of 8 till 6.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I apologise to everyone. For some reason an echo has come onto the call. I appreciate that this makes it slightly difficult. It's a little bit beyond my control at the moment, but hopefully it will disappear. Have an interesting question about flexible working. I sort of posed to the panel. This is from a coaching company, and they say, from our work coaching over 1,000 women going through maternity transition, we know that working flexibly is one of the key ways to help women successfully manage their family and career responsibilities. But what else could be done within organisations to encourage more creative approaches to traditional working patterns? Fiona, is this something that you'd like to pick up on? No,
what would I suggest?
Or Ruth, I mean the home-based.
I mean, I think that one of the things that as a parent people struggle with at set times of the year, and I'm not sure what the rest of the audience thinks, but there are, key points: sports days, concerts, these sometimes school outings, and it's just the flexibility of approach. One element that is being looked at, I think, by some companies is a carer's, or like this flexible benefit, a carer's account almost, or a family account, whereby you might be able to match some of your holiday with some paid or unpaid time that an employer could give to enable you to have some of that flexibility. And it gives, it gives loyalty, it gives a positive focus to say, well, I'm going to work hard, but I'm going to take this time to have a bit of flexibility, because I think it's not just yes, the childcare issue is a huge issue, but we just need a flexible approach and the ability of, certainly on also the working from home, that it is, as long as the mechanisms are in place to show that you are in contact with your workplace, that you can work flexibly within that, and it doesn't mean you're I don't know, skiving in the views of the employer.
Okay, so following on from that, maybe Sarah, I know obviously you've got the parent network and everything, but how do we ensure that family-friendly policies are a benefit, or these benefits are a benefit to everyone, but not just those people with families?
Well, I think, we talked earlier about flexible working, and I think most parents really value flexible working. But what we try and do at PwC is also showcase all those people who work flexibly for other reasons, whether it's because they are potential Olympians for next year's Olympics, or because they're undertaking further study to develop themselves personally. So I think, I think somebody said it already about not wanting to. Diversity
it's slightly odd in the sense that we're talking about certain groups, but actually what you want to do is to create an environment in which everyone understands each other's and each other's needs. But I think the need for flexibility is universal, and it's often not about working less hours. Often it's just about having more control over when, where, and how you work.
Yeah.
So I think it's, you know, building an inclusive workplace is about building an understanding amongst all our people of the varying needs and requirements of different segments of our people. And that's what you really want. You want understanding and you want trust, because everybody, when they come to work, you know, you have to believe wants to do a good job. But we have to offer them different solutions to enable them to do a good job and maximise their potential.
Great. Okay, I'm just going to come to one question. Laura, on the subject of childcare vouchers, if this is something that you can give us something on, can you clarify that the estimated earnings calculation for post 6th of April joiners should be based on what is known as at the point employee joins the scheme and based on benefits elected or sacrifice for the forthcoming year and not on any previous year or post-sacrifice previous month value? Does that make sense?
Yes, it should be. The whole point of the basic earnings assessment, when HMRC initially wrote about it in their guidance, was that it's for the year going forward. So it's everything known at the point of an employee joining the scheme that will carry going forward. So for instance, if they've taken the salary sacrifice for childcare vouchers, as that salary sacrifice will be in place that year going forward, it's the earnings after the salary sacrifice has taken place, because obviously that's known at the point of joining the scheme. So things like that are unforeseen, so pay rises, reduction in hours that happen later on down the line are not included. But if anything's known at the point of joining the scheme, then that's included in the earnings assessment.
Okay, great, thank you. We could talk about this for ages, and I think everybody, we've got all sorts of things to say and ask, but just sort of really to sum up, I would like to pose one last poll. You know, after we could talk so much more about this, but at the end of the day, you know, is engaging families the job of the workforce? What do we think? I'd appreciate if you could make a decision on whether you think it's yes, no, or at this stage you're unsure. I think that would be very interesting to see, and potentially something that we could end on. If a couple more of you will vote, that's great. The numbers are going up, and I'm interesting to see that. I'm going to close the poll in a second. But interesting to see that a lot of you, 75% of you, do think indeed that it is something that employees should be, you know, putting as a top priority. Okay, so just as a closing, just something has come through about flexible working. Somebody has said, my company finds it difficult to offer flexible working patterns as individuals work on specific projects with specific clients, so they need to be available during traditional working hours, and sometimes teams aren't big enough to cover. So unfortunately that keeps the sector that this particular person asking in traditional and male dominated. Fiona, is this something you could pick up on?
Well, yes, absolutely. I think that often when I'm working from home, my clients don't know that I'm at home unless the dogs bark in the background. But I think what enables me to work remotely and flexibly from home is I have all the tools that I would have in the office. So my actual place of work doesn't affect the ability to do my work, because I've got the tools in order to do the job.
And what about availability, though?
Well, as far as availability goes, I mean, being a recruiter, you're often in other meetings. So if I'm going, you know, for example, I do a yoga class on a Tuesday morning that my clients don't know I do, but I put my out of office on and just say I'll be back at my desk by 11:30. You know, I'm in meetings and please leave me a message or send me an email and I'll come back to you then. And I mean, you know, everybody does go into meetings, so there's no reason why my client can't manage that. We also have account management teams, so that's probably important to say, so that, you know, a client will know that they can go to somebody else at F1 if they need something answered really urgently.
Great. All right. I think it really helps. This has been a snapshot of what I think could be a very long discussion, a day's conference really. We've heard snippets. I hope we've helped and answered questions. I'd like to thank everybody for being part of the session. Thank you to all the attendees, and thank you very, very much to the panellists. And of course to Edenred for hosting this session today. So thank you very much everybody. Any feedback is greatly appreciated. I am sorry that there were a few sound issues. They just come and go, and apologies for that. But thank you very much for being part of this discussion, and hopefully we will be in touch with you all again soon. Many thanks indeed.